Good afternoon, everybody. I want to begin by thanking my friend President Sarkozy for his leadership and his hospitality, and I want to thank the people of Cannes for this extraordinary setting. Over the past 2 years, those of us in the G20 have worked together. The recovery has been fragile, and since our last meeting in Seoul, we've experienced a number of new shocks. Disruptions in oil supplies, the tragic tsunami in Japan, and the financial crisis in Europe. As a result, advanced economies, including the United States, are growing and creating jobs, but not nearly fast enough. Emerging economies have started to slow. Global demand is weakening. Around the world, hundreds of millions of people are unemployed or underemployed. Put simply, the world faces challenges that put our economic recovery at risk. Squarely, understanding that these problems will not be solved overnight, could we make progress? After 2 days of very substantive discussions, I can say that we've come together and made important progress to put our economic recoveries on a firmer footing. With our European friends, how they will move forward and build upon the plan they agreed to last week to resolve this crisis. Events in Greece over the past 24 hours have underscored the importance of implementing the plan fully and as quickly as possible. Having heard from our European partners over the past 2 days, I am confident that Europe has the capacity to meet this challenge. I know it isn't easy, but what is absolutely critical and what the world looks for in moments such as this is action. That's how we confronted our financial crisis in the United States, having our banks submit to stress tests that were rigorous, increasing capital buffers, and passing the strongest financial reforms since the Great Depression. To address the crisis, put ourselves on a stronger footing and to help rescue the global economy. And that's the challenge that Europe now faces. Make no mistake, there is more hard work ahead and more difficult choices to make. But our European partners have laid a foundation on which to build, and it has all the elements needed for success. A credible firewall to prevent the crisis from spreading, strengthening European banks, charting a sustainable path for Greece, and confronting the structural issues that are at the heart of the current crisis. And here in Cannes, we've moved the ball forward. Europe remains on track to implement a sustainable path for Greece. Italy has agreed to a monitoring program with the IMF, in fact invited it. Tools have been identified that will better enable the world to support European action. And European finance ministers will carry this work forward next. I'll start with Jim Coonan of AP.
New job performance today, back in the States. You're undoubtedly vulnerable to a Republican who might run on a message of change. And if I may add, given that you have just witnessed the difficulties of averting economic problems, what state do you think the economy will be in when you face re-election?
Jim, I have to say at the moment is the politics of a year from now. I'm worried about putting people back to work right now because those folks are hurting and the U.S. economy is underperforming. And so everything that we're doing here in the at the G20 mirrors our efforts back home. That is, how do we boost growth? How do we shrink our deficits in a way that doesn't slow the recovery right now? How do we make sure that our workers are getting the skills and the training they need to compete in the needs for jobs now? But it'll also lay the foundation for future growth through investments in infrastructure, for example. So my hope is that in the House of Representatives, when they look at today's job numbers, which were positive, but indicate once again that the economy is growing way too slow, that they think twice before they vote no again on the only proposal out there right now that independent economists say would actually make a dent in unemployment right now. There's no excuse for inaction. That's true globally. It's certainly true back home as well, and I'm going to keep on pushing it regardless of what the politics are.
TARP was done with U.S. funds. There wasn't any international involvement here. Are you confident now that the European leaders are going to fund this firewall or bailout fund themselves, not looking for handouts from other countries, and that they will do what they have to do? And the second part of my question is, how hard was it to convince these folks to do stimulus measures when your own stimulus measure, you've mentioned it twice now, is not going anywhere right now in Capitol Hill?
Well, first of all, we didn't have a long time, and this I'm speaking now for the whole of the G20. What we've said is the international community is going to stand ready to assist and make sure that the overall global economy is cushioned by the gyrations in the market and the shocks that arise as Europe is working these issues through. And so they're going to have a strong partner in us, but European leaders understand that ultimately what the markets are looking for is a strong signal to Europe. No, what we were saying is that, and this is reflected in the communique, that, for example, creating additional tools for the IMF, Chancellor Merkel, and all the other European leaders, I believe they have.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm curious what you would say to Americans back home who watch their 401ks recover largely when, with the brand new political tumult in Greece, watch themselves lose essentially what they have gained back. You mentioned you're confident in the bailout plan. Are you confident this will actually happen, and if so, that will work?
Well, first, the stock market was down when I first took office. In the first few months I was in office, about 3,000 points lower than it is now. So nothing's happened in the last 2 weeks. People's 401ks have been affected the way you described. Am I confident that this will work? I think that there's more work to do. I think there are going to be some ups and downs along the way. But I am confident that the key players in Europe, political leadership, understands how much of a stake they have in making sure that this crisis is resolved, that the Eurozone remains intact. And I think that they are going to do what's necessary in order to make that happen. Now, like rebuilding our infrastructure, our roads and our bridges, putting teachers back in the classroom, providing tax credits to small businesses. You say, Nora, that the reason they haven't voted for them is because they don't want to tax small business. Well, actually, that's not. If that's their rationale, then it doesn't fly, because a component of the American Jobs Bill essentially said we can create hundreds of thousands of jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, making America more competitive, and the entire program will be paid for by a tax, not on millionaires, but people making $1 million a year or more, which in the United States is about a little over 300,000 people. Now, there aren't a lot of small businesses across the country that are making that kind of money. In fact, less than 3% of small businesses make more than $250,000 a commission. I mean, there are just a lot of institutions here in Europe. I think several, I'm not sure whether it was Sarkozy or Merkel or Barroso or somebody,
that you declare stalemate to try and reach common ground. And do you feel like you have been an effective leader when it comes to the economy?
Well, first of all, wherever Republicans indicate an interest in doing things that would actually grow the economy, I'm right there with them. So they've said that passing trade bills with South Korea and Panama and Colombia would help spur growth. Those got done with significant bipartisan support. They've suggested that we need to reform our patent laws. That's something that was part of my long-term program for economic growth. We've got that done. What I've said is all those things are nice and they're important, but if we want to grow the economy right now, then we have to think bigger. We've got to do something bolder and more significant. The financial system back in the United States, it did not do wonders for anybody's political standing because people's general attitude is, you know what, if the financial sector is behaving recklessly or not making good decisions, other folks shouldn't have to suffer for it. You layer on top of that the fact that you're negotiating with congressional action, and the refinancing proposal that we put forward in Las Vegas is an example of that, helping students with student loans. We're going to keep on rolling out administrative steps that we can take that strengthen the economy. But if we're going to do something big to jumpstart the economy at a time when it's stabilized but unemployment is way too high, Congress is going to need to act. And in terms of my track record on the economy, here's just a simple way of thinking about it. When I came into office, the U.S. economy had contracted by 9%, the largest contraction since the Great Depression. A little over a year later, the economy was growing by 4%, and it's been growing ever since. Now, is that good enough? Absolutely not. We've got to do more. As soon as I get some signal from Congress that they're willing to take their responsibilities seriously, I think we can do more. But that's going to require them to break out of the rigid ideological positions that they've been taking. And the same is true, by the way, when it comes to deficit reduction. We can solve all our problems. We can grow our economy now, put people back to work, reduce our deficit. And you get surprising consensus from economists about how to do it, from both